Peace. This is the Ask Your Old Head podcast with Justice Raji. My guest today is CJ Robbins. Peace, CJ.
Peace, Justice. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So before we get to talking, I always like to give you a moment to give some respect and reverence to anybody that you just want to show some love and put their name out there. So
okay, I'm gonna do the generic one, but I'm gonna do it a little bit differently. I was thinking about this when I saw the questions come through, and I wanted to give a shout to my ancestors, but really to the demons that my ancestors slayed, and shout out to them, right? In acknowledgement that I don't have to slay them again,
yes, sir.
And as well to the demons that my ancestors wounded, in acknowledgement that I need to kill them because they're going to come after me. They're coming after me, and they're coming after all of my ancestors' descendants. And then shout out to the demons that my ancestors did not acknowledge or see or slay in any way, because I got to wound or slay them.
Yes.
So
I appreciate you.
So yeah, that was my thought for
Right.
to give a shout.
So, as I like to do, just get right into it. So, CJ, can you share with me just a standard or practice that you hold yourself to as a man that you think is important?
Yeah, well, one thing I think is really important is just being open-minded and mindful when people are talking to you of where they're at, right? Listening for the content. That's a practice that I try to employ. But where I'm at in that walk is listening for the content and being mindful of what's happening with me during that time. Because at some point you can't just swallow that. You got to speak to that.
Yeah.
You got to, but hearing what the person is actually trying to say. Right. And that's a practice. It comes in handy in all aspects of life for me. Comes in handy with family, really comes in handy with family. But I mean, honestly, it could be a random person on the street. I walked up to my house a few days ago and there was a sister sitting on the porch at like 11 p.m. I was walking the dog. My first reaction was like, what the hell are you doing on my porch? And I said that. I think I actually said that to her. I said, why are you sitting on my porch? And she got up. Come to find out, the sister was struggling. I don't know what her background is or I don't know what she's actually going through. Mm-hmm. But once I sat and talked to her, I could tell she was sick. Her nose was running. I don't know what made her sick, but I could tell she was sick.
Right.
Nose was running. It was cold out. And I guess she had approached my wife. She had knocked on the door and asked my wife for some money. And my wife gave her a couple of bucks, but she was sitting waiting because my wife was going to give her some tea because it was cold out. The couple of bucks wasn't enough for her to get into a shelter. So we just kind of talked to her and figured some things out. But I could have just been pissed. Yeah. I could have just been heated. I could have just been like, get the F off my porch. But come to find out, the sister was really going through something. So just listening for what the person is trying to share.
So is that as something that you practice or try to do? Is there a specific, can you think of kind of some things that help you get to that level of understanding that you needed to start to do that?
Lots of arguments, not getting anywhere. Lots of times where I find myself digging, where both I and the other person that I'm talking to are digging our heels in. Mm-hmm. And what I realize is that neither of us is being heard. The reality is we're not really talking to each other. We're talking for each other, but we're not really talking to each other. And a lot of times I would find myself telling the other person about themselves, what they feel and what they do. Right. And then they would tell me what I feel and what I do. Well, why are we doing that? Right. So yeah, that's where that comes from. And I think there's actually been a huge tie there for me with my family, but also close relationships, friends. Lost a lot of friends over the years, right? So, and gained some too. Yeah. But you just find where the seam is. Why is this happening?
Right, so. Right. Yeah, I think about some of my mother used to counsel me and my brother to like if we were arguing about something, one, not to fight each other, like not to like turn to like physically fight each other, but then like if she felt if there was a request for someone else to weigh in, that she wouldn't pick a side, right? She would more ask, well, what was going on, right? Which can be incredibly frustrating when you want your side to be vindicated. You know what I mean? But and I would say even with my own kids, sometimes I have to give them the, So wait, what's going on? What are we doing? Like why are we even having this conversation? Like where this all, and they're like, I don't want to talk about that. I want you to talk about why,
why I'm right.
Why I'm right. Indeed. Yeah. Appreciate it. Cool. So second piece. Is can you give me something that you have learned about relationships that you handle differently now than in the past? And that's relationships broadly defined. Can you share something there?
Yeah, I think one thing that I do very differently now is I believe early on for me with relationships, the most important thing was just maintaining the relationship. We just need to stay connected. And so what that led to for me was a lot of sacrifice in relationship spaces, whether that was with my family, whether that was professional relationships, whether that was romantic relationships. And so then the next iteration from that, so I had a long-term 4-year but long-distance relationship where at the end of it, I felt like I gave a lot, like more than I was willing to give. And started thinking, man, I gotta, people can't treat me this way. This isn't okay. I don't deserve to be treated this way, And so then I started looking for reciprocation in relationships. So I'd look at like, if I'm not receiving, what am I receiving? But even that was not fulfilling, right? Because then relationships all just become transactional. And it's like, well, you do for me and I do for you. What are you doing for me and what have you done for me lately?
All right.
I think what I've learned is that what's in it for you in a relationship is both what you put in and what you expect out. And if you have a high expectation of what you'll receive out, excuse me, you will think differently about what you put in, right? And so remembering that what I get out of this relationship is very much dependent on what I'm going to put into it. And so what I found for me, ultimately with relationships, is the toughest part is emotional content for me. And that means, and I think it's that way for a lot of dudes, right? I mean, just we're socialized differently generally. Yes, stop crying. Why are you so sensitive? All of these are things we hear consistently growing up. Or even how acceptable it is to be mad, go out there and get them, but it's unacceptable to be sad or really to speak to any other emotions. So for me, what I found is really identifying what the emotional content is that I'm having, and speaking to it at some point. It doesn't always have to be right in the moment, but deciding when that point is, excuse me, deciding when that point is, and when that point comes, sharing. But knowing, you got to kind of keep tabs on where you've been emotionally with somebody. That's really what your relationship is at the end of the day. We're emotional beings at the end of the day. So, I feel like we do a huge disservice to our boys, especially in the Black community, but generally we do a massive disservice to our boys because how can we expect them to conquer the world without fully understanding themselves? And so then they get to that point and stuff hits the fan, right? And we fall off. Well, why did we fall off? What was so hard about maintaining that line? 9 times out of 10, you talk to folks and they have awakenings. They have emotional awakenings, right? I want the folks that I look up to who tend to be leaders or people that I consider leaders. They actually are able to gather some of that emotional content. They're able to stay moving forward and moving in a positive direction because along the way they've known where they were, they've known who they were, they know who they are from their emotional center, and that's where they move from. So you never end up way out of bounds or far out of your lane. You you understand who you are and what makes you up, what you're comprised of. So excuse me. I know I got way out philosophical on that, but like,
the answers are out there. It's not for me to define the parameters of the square under which one can share their truth.
I feel you.
I think adding on to that question, because for me, I think a common thing that I encounter is sort of the idea that like logic and emotions are these clearly defined separate things, right? And especially as I see it articulated by men, right? Like in terms of or interpreted, maybe that's the better word. Is this sort of like, yeah, I'm just being logical, and they'll kind of like tighten up, you can see sort of the like trying to button down how I feel. I'm gonna pack this pain deep down in my pancreas. I'm gonna squeeze it over here, and then I'm gonna respond, give my answer. Which is often not necessarily a response to, maybe what's coming, but just sort of the like, this is the company line in my mind around this issue, right? Was there I know for me, a real particular thing that helped me clarify that was actually taking a class about emotions, like from a psychiatric perspective, what have you, in college, and going like, oh, so like there's other people that think about this in a whole different way. Is there anything that anything that happened to you, anything that you read, or like helped move your thinking around that?
Some work, excuse me, doing direct service work and being in a space where my job was to help people move along that continuum in life, move towards the positive. Some of that, I think, again, when you're doing that work as a profession, you're, excuse me, you're really so focused on the tools that you need to do the work. I think so. I went to law school, which is like anti-emotion world. Emotion doesn't exist, right? There's no such thing as emotion, and if there is, it's a bad thing. It doesn't help anybody. All it does is complicate everything, which is the underlying. I believe it's one of the underlying philosophies to our justice system is that reason has value and emotion does not, and reason makes things simple, and reason makes us more powerful and stronger as human beings, and emotions make us weaker and more complicated. And when you look at the system, I actually had a mentor going into law school that said essentially the main goal of the law is to take very complex situations and simplify them. Well, coming straight out of law school, that felt like, I felt like I was on a high, like I was moving in the right direction. I had all the knowledge that I needed, and I was going to go conquer the world, right? The reality is when you look to the state of the people in the legal field and their relationships, this takes a major toll. And it's not a true representation of who we are as human beings. It's misguided. They've missed something. One or 1-0 is out of place in the coding, Right. And so what gets pumped out is alcoholism. What gets pumped out is divorce. What gets pumped out is kids that hate their parents because they never spend any time with them. That's not everybody's picture, and but I promise you, if you go around life simplifying everything from emotional content to reason, you will be hated in spaces you should be loved. You will find people pull away from you. You will alienate people. You will make people feel a way that makes them not want to be around you and not want to associate with you. So, for me, coming out of law school, I'm glad, I kind of talked my way into where, to an answer to your question, which is really post law school, I was very unfulfilled. Not only that, being a black man, we are a culture that recognizes our emotion a bit more, I think, than dominant culture and white culture do. You can't keep it real and not acknowledge your feelings.
I think I always like to think about it like the sort of like the that the uncle, the relative that may curse somebody out at a family gathering, and that it's going to happen, or not that it has to happen, but it might have to happen depending on if there was all right, and we're not all gonna go, oh, she's out of. How could she be so upset? It's just like, well, you know, she had to say something.
Yeah,
you know, and we all like it is like, y'all just gonna go back to eating after all that?
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, you know, someone in the family who's the appropriate person may go and console and mediate, or you know, whatever the case may be. But you're gonna take that. You know, you're gonna keep it pushing. I always think about a memory of my grandmother we had a housewarming party at the house that I grew up most of my life with my mom and my brother and my grandmother. We had like a housewarming party, and I was scooting around. You know, the adults are, you know, housewarming partying, and I was scooting around in the box in the living room, like, you know, having a good time. And my grandmother just gave me the, like, almost, it wasn't clear, like, you've been up too late. What are you still doing up while you in the living room? Kind of like, and I was like, hey, Nana, all right. And I just sort of like paused, and I, you know, gave her appropriate, you know, respect as my elder. I sort of scooted my way back out of the room. Like, you know, I was hot for a bit. I thought, man, Nana didn't talk to me like that. And then I let it, you know, I let it go. I know, you know, later mom checked in with me. You know, it happened. You know what I mean? But it's not the end of the world. And I feel like in our community, there's a space made, you know, for someone to be upset, you know, or to have, you know, a moment. For you, what are some of the outlets though that you think maybe that energy gets directed into, you know, from your experience?
That's a really good question, and one that I'm coming to terms with more now that I'm a father and we got a dog and a mortgage and married and, you know, go down the list. Now that my time is limited, physical activity is critical. I found, you know, I played basketball for years, so I still am holding on to the last little few years I've got. Yeah, at 37, the last few years, I do see guys that are older than me that are playing that look great. They're still playing well. If anybody has any secrets to share with me, please let me know. But my knees, ankles, and hips are starting to express their unhappiness. Well, my ankles have been expressing it since I was in my 20s, and now it's my knees and my hips. My knees more so, and now barely my hips starting to let me know. Right. So, so physical activity is critical, and you know, and to me, and making it change over time, and making it a group thing. You know, where it can be. So like taking walks with groups of people, or, you know, whatever, you know, connecting with people that kind of way, or taking walks as a family. I think that's a really big thing we miss out on in the everyday drudgery of life, like from point A to point B. I love when we get those in, especially in the beautiful parks we have here in Oregon. Like, I mean, we need to be outside. But for the other things, I'm trying to get into swimming. I got dreadlocks. That's kind of a non-starter in some ways, you know, like, unless I want my hair falling out.
Right. It takes a little more planning. Like, all right, if I swim, all right, I got to get the towel. I used to have this stretchy towel back when I was amongst the brothers of long hair. And it actually pilfered it from the woman I love. But it would allow me to get more moisture out of my hair a little faster. Right? So it would be like, all right, so if I swim, I do this, then I and I try to coordinate. But then, like, if you know, impromptu, at some point, it means you're going to have to sit and, like, make sure all the water comes out. Yeah. You know what I mean, which is... Yep,
that chlorine.
Yes, and you got to get the chlorine.
Damaging. So a little bit of that. But I'm on my bike. Portland's a great town for biking, so... year round, actually. I mean, it gets tough in like late December through January, but it's manageable, and I live about 3 miles from my work, so it's really, I'm going downhill mostly on the way in, so the workout is a 15-minute uphill workout on the way back. So which is a good shot in the arm. Keeps you going. So physical activity is important to me. Mental challenges are important to me outside of how am I going to get this child to stop laying on the ground, get up and put their coat on, and get out the house? like those are, yeah, exactly. That's a real challenge. And, you know, every time I want to snatch that child up off the ground and forcibly put the coat on and take the child out the house. But I can't do that. So I also need, I need other mental challenges outside of that where I can explore and fail in the most aggressive way too, and learn from those things, right? So I try to put mental challenges in front of myself or have mental challenges for myself. One thing I do with that is music. It's always a challenge to come up with a song that sounds good, that's also doesn't sound like the last song that was made, and brings your own creativity and energy to it. So that's one of my personal outlets. Reading, and I read a lot. I think most people read more these days than they think. It's just that there's only a certain type of reading that's classified as reading.
Right.
Like if you're reading a tweet, that's not reading. Really? Like there are people who read volumes of tweets in a day. They are reading, right? They are reading. It may not be, the language may be, I don't even want to say below the standard, but I'll just say the language may not demand the level of mental attention to challenge the mind at at a high level.
Clearly connected narrative, but it doesn't. It's still it's still reading nonetheless. It's still an engagement with words, and space,
right? And so there's some of that for me, but I just think doing things that take me off my daily path, but are challenging, physically stimulating, mentally stimulating. Spirituality, I tend to not get as much. The way that I think about things brings a level of spirituality to it. I tend to not get the regular practice. I guess in many ways I'm a typical Oregonian, typical Northwestian like that. But grew up in the church, grew up in the Christian church. So, definitely a believer that there are major things going on around here that I don't understand, that there is a entity or being that does understand on some levels, or beings that understand it much better than me, and that I'm not supposed to understand that stuff. I'm supposed to believe, and I'm supposed to walk a certain kind of way. So.
All right. Well, thank you. So this next question is just right now. What's just something that's really important for you right now, either in your life or just you think it's just something that's on your mind or your focus, I don't know, however that lands with you.
Yeah. Well, Sunday's a really good day to ask me this because it, in our house, tends to be the only day that there's actual relaxation without anything else on the plate. And regeneration and also clean up. So we, fix the mess from last week.
Right.
And all of that. So today's a good day to ask that because I think for me, I'm trying to put as much intentional energy as I can into my 5-year-old daughter, my 3.5 in dog year-old dog, and my relationship with my wife and our house. I say that, it's really interesting because I say that it's, how are you doing that if you only do that one day a week, right? I mean, right. The model might be a little bit off if 6 days a week you're doing something else, and then one day a week it's all family, but trying to find they're important to me in ways that I don't even understand yet. And so I think really understanding some of those ways a little bit better. I think that helps when the little one is writhing on the floor when the well-fed, well-slept, with a excellent shelter over their head, warm, and, little one is writhing on the floor in pain because they have to put their coat on and go to school. I think knowing that little one deeply is what gets that little one up off the floor more than anything else. I mean, the old school way is cut them to the white meat. Yeah. Is punch them until they bite the back of punch them so hard they bite the back of their tongue, as Bernie Mac said, but ultimately, I feel like we have tremendous power ultimately in our communities and in our families to be better and to build the people who are around us up. And so if I know that little one writhing on the ground, I don't want them in that pain or in any other pain, even if that pain is kind of self-driven. And I'm a rift a little bit because I was at Little Big Burger last night we had an episode. We went to take the little one to Hub, the Hopworks Urban Brewery spot right up the street from us, and little one loves it, family loves it, so we were just gonna grab a bite. Got a little bit late. Everybody was hungry. There was a wait at Hub for a half hour. We're like, we can't do that. We're hungry. We got to eat. So we go down to Lompoc, which is right around the corner. Make the corner, and we're there walking in. The little one's like, I don't want to eat here. I'm not eating here. Basically, yeah, fine.
I'm not
eating here. Yeah, at some point, I really don't want to eat here. And she had said it as we were walking down there. But at some point, she had hit the wall for her. I'm not eating here, and she started walking back towards Williams. Exactly. Walking back towards Williams and made the corner, hit the corner and took the left. At which point I shouted her name, right? Mm-hmm. And my wife also did, and she started turning and came back, and we give each other the look, and that's the look like it's time to shut it down. Like, you can do so many things, but walking away from mom and declaring you will not do something, walking away from mom and daddy, and then turning the corner on us, like I run this,
Y'all know how I feel.
Yeah, exactly.
Where I'm at right now. I'm going back to Hub.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Tell them you'll pay them on credit, right? Yeah. So but so we caught up with her. We shut it down. Went home. I mean, she was furious, and as anyone would be if they were right there as I was when I was little, and I was right there and had something in my hands, in my grasp, right, and then started acting a fool and somebody took it away from me. Yeah. And so she was heated, but we both, myself and my wife, we knew we were making the right decision. So we head home, and we decided that she and I were going to have a Little Big Burger. So I was going to go grab a Little Big Burger. So I went to Little Big Burger, and I saw a young man, probably about my daughter's age, acting in ways that would get her removed from any place. And I was like, man. I mean, but the main thing that the young man said where I would tighten up my little one for saying this out loud in a public space was, "What's taking so long for the food?" The parents just acted like that was cool with the people the staff working there right within earshot, right? And I'm like, okay, that's all right. That's how we do it. But I got to thinking about, when kids have everything they need and a lot of what they want, maybe not all that they want, but a lot of what they want, and pretty much everything they need. What's the responsibility on us as parents to make sure that they understand the tremendous amount of privilege and blessing there is in that? And how do we do it? You hear, you think of the Bible and the story of the prodigal son, right? Who goes out to conquer the world, but has everything he needs, but goes out to conquer the world. And then when he comes back, they're like, "Oh my goodness, you're back!" And they welcome with open arms. Well, in some ways, that's mirrors to me the hero's journey of Joseph Campbell that Joseph Campbell lays out, which for folks who don't know that is essentially the Skywalker story, right?
The hero with a 1,000 names.
Mm-hmm.
It's the story we
keep telling
over
and over and over with a different face on it or a different right.
Yeah, moving pieces around.
Yeah, good and evil. Everything's working together or working against each other, whatever the case may be in the moment. But I think about that, and I think about the story of the prodigal son. I think about all that, and I wonder what's the myth that drives us today? What do we as parents think of when our kids are in that moment that helps guide us, right? And I'm Bernie Mac, right? Punch him in the throat, right? Is that what guides us? Right? Is it the Bernie Mac? Is that it, or is it the passively address what the kid is saying in quiet conversations, that kind of the whispers. Oh, okay, yeah, you don't say that sort of. Or is it the it's out loud? There are people who are making this food for us. It may feel disrespectful to them for you to be asking why the food is taking so long, but I imagine that they're cooking it as quickly as they can, right? And then what's the myth that feeds that? Right. How are we fed by parents? So, I think to both indirectly I did all the indirect. So the direct part of the answer to the question is, to me, it's finding more mediums that will lift me up in my goals and my focus and what I want to do in life. And to me, right now, my family is extremely important to me. Right. Everybody in my community's families are important to me as well. Right. So being that uncle to the kids that I'm not related to, you know, in the way I talk to them and see them on the street, as well as a better uncle to my actual nephews, right? And seeing family in spaces that it may not be evident, right? Mm-hmm. Like family is connected both by value and by genetics, right? I think that's a good summary. In some way.
Peace. Thank you. I think it's definitely a vector as a parent. I guess for me, where like the rubber hits the road and where you go, wait a minute, all right, my child has done something that is outside of the character that I believe we are, right? You know, and that, you know, so how do I redirect them in a way, and this is something that I, you know, landed with, that reflects how I think we should go forward here, and not just the displeasure, so to speak, not just that you're wrong, right? Because I do need to let them know they're wrong, but also I need to let them know here's how you need to do it. You know what I mean? Or here's the rationale why you're wrong. Something that was very, very, very important to me, but I always, you know, find it challenging, you know, in public spaces, like observing the way different parents handle stuff, and sometimes trying to be, I mean, you know, in some of those situations, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to be like, man, you're not raising your kids correctly. Right, you know what I mean? I don't know you. Like, right. I'm not in no space where I should be running up on you. If there's no mortal danger in the room, I mean, like the kid isn't running with scissors or something, I can't really, it was not appropriate for me to jump in there on that. Yeah. But the sort of the experiential, like the awareness of that is always, it's always an interesting thing. You know? It's like going up against what, you know, either what you were raised in and what you come to do now, you know, as your own man, you know, not just as as a 12-year-old thinking about, yeah, man, those other kids over there, they get to do anything. You know what I mean? My mom, she making me do all this stuff. Nah, you know what I mean? Right. You think stuff like that sometimes when you're a kid, and even maybe still thinking when you're an adult, but being on the other side of the line as a father now, I'm like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I need to think about that one.
Yeah. Yeah, and I you know, I think I tend to look to the challenges that I see other people facing as parents, as teaching. Like I'm looking to be fed. Like teach me something, you know, and I can see if it goes away that I'm like, oh well, I didn't really, you know, that didn't give me anything new or a new tool. Yeah. But keeping it in that space, because if I you know, I'm personally, if I am working with my child, I don't even want my wife to speak up. Like, and we haven't, well, I don't think we have an agreement, but we try to aspire towards making sure each other does not jump in when the other does, because it's, I mean, it's one of the, I mean, there's a visceral reaction as a parent, you know, like, this is my child, you know, like, there's an immediate, and it doesn't matter if it's the other parent talking, because at that moment, this is my child. I'm working with them, you know. And then the conversation later. We can talk later about what I did, didn't do, should have done, could have done. And I'm fallible. I'm flawed, right? So with even within that, like, flawed may not be the right word, because imperfection is not necessarily a flaw. I'm imperfect though. You know, I'm imperfect. I'm human. We all are. And so being able to grapple with that, like, my kids will be imperfect. They are human. They will say things that they don't mean the full meaning of what they said. They will say things they haven't thought about. What they say.
Yeah, I think. I mean, I can agree that that sort of we have a similar practice in terms of, you know, if I'm in with the kids on this, it's sort of like, all right, let justice go. Like this is his show right now. Like there can be no division amongst the parents. You know what I mean? That we might need to counsel later and kind of go, well, this is what I thought. Like, okay, maybe all right, and then you in terms of your kids, it's not necessarily like you run in the room like, you know what I did earlier, you were totally right, young 12-year-old. No, but you make the mental note and to make the adjustment, and I like to say, go back and, check in with the kid at the reasonable amount of time for them to absorb and deal with the tension of what went wrong, right? Because I think you don't want to, from my experience, what I try to do, I don't want to immediately let you off the hook, you know what I mean? Because I want to make sure let you know that we still love you, like, still care. You just out of pocket, you know what I mean? Now, let's get back in the groove. Most definitely. Thank you for that.
Yeah. And I think on in line and on point with your question, there's that a family, and I really want to emphasize that second part that I said about how can I extend my family? How can I grow my family? Who's in my family that I don't see right now, that I'm not recognizing, or that I don't see? Who have I not heard from in a long time? How are they doing? That's kind of the evolution for me of moving into being, I'm 37, so I'll be 40 shortly. I'm feeling closer to 40 than the world than the world is, mostly, because when I say I'm almost 40, most folks who are over their 50s say, "Oh, you a baby." So, you just a baby. Or even when I say, so the young folks all think I'm old, the old folks all think I'm young. Yeah. Right. So,
yeah. Well, I mean, I'm in the, I'm 41, and I like to say I'm in the, I'm officially all the way into the, I'm young old. So for old people, I'm not there yet.
Yeah.
Right?
Can't claim that.
Bear witness. There's a lot of things just physically that I'm like, I could run over there, like if I had to, that sort of thing, like that. When I know when I'm maybe like 65, it's just a different prospect, right?
Right.
And then, like I say, the other side of that is being old young, which means when I look the other direction, like if I'm out with, especially one of my previous jobs, I've worked with a lot of guys that were, maybe 8 or 9 years younger than me, right? Some more. And so if one of them had like a birthday thing or like, hey, we're going to do it, and like, Roger, come through. So I would, maybe come through, but I would, recognize like, I'm older than y'all. I'm not really going to be here for all of this, whatever y'all doing. You know what I mean? I'm older. I got other stuff going on. Some of your peers who are here are not necessarily my peers. And I need to be respectful of the idea that, time tap out. You know what I mean? It's time when I got to roll. Y'all, young people.
Y'all go do young people things.
Yeah, go be together. Don't have me in there, out of place. And bearing witness to that. And it's an interesting place to be, age-wise, because it's not a, and you tell me what you think, I feel like we as a community have a rush to age. Like we're like, oh, we tell kids stop playing with toys, 9, you know what I'm saying? Like, and then you get in your 20s or something, and you're supposed to be, now you're an adult. Go take care of everything.
Yeah,
and it's
go
like,
do.
It's like, well, how much? How do I know when the mission's accomplished, so to speak? I think that can be a challenge. So. For you, here's a question I asked. I know you, or at least you in the previous time, and spoke to an engagement with philosophy or interest in philosophy. What would be? Is there any piece of philosophy or something specifically like around the idea of like what philosophy is that you think maybe you could give your interpretation of as it relates to you, like in your regular life or whatever? How you think about it?
I think, where does it come from for me is where I would start. Like how do I think about the things that are happening around me? Yeah. I think the reason that I think the way I think about what's happening around me is a lot of the educational experiences that I've had, but also the life experiences I've had. I was a liberal arts major, so I was an English major, right, in undergrad. Lots of folks will go, well, that was just college, but I was in undergrad for the better part of 8 years. So it's a significant part of my 37 years, right? The last 2 years, my most successful years in undergrad, I focused and honed in on English, which makes me, I think it changes the way I see what's around me. I see everything as English rhetoric and composition. So I tend to see a lot of things as both, school didn't turn me into a philosopher. The hood did. So, I was always that guy that was talking about the other layer to this conversation, or the other thing that we could see. If we turn this thing sideways, it's flat. Right. I was that guy. And so school just kind of cultivated that. And rhetoric is the study of persuasion, and composition is the study of creation. And so with that focus, for me, everything is an argument. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter. It could be a shirt. It could be shoes. It could be a sign. It could be a stop sign, right? It's an argument. It's making an argument for something and against something else. Yeah. As in its simplest form, a stop sign is making an argument for you to stop, right? Yeah. It's red. The writing on it is white. It's supposed to be, it's supposed to hit you. Yeah, yeah. Stop. It's making an argument for you to not go, right? Yeah. So, or at least look before you go. So for me, that's where a lot of it comes from in the way that I look at things. But I also find philosophers tend to talk about deeper meaning. I think that's a value judgment, because when we say deeper, that's supposed to mean better. When we say deeper, that's supposed to mean smarter or wiser. Right. It doesn't really matter that I didn't like a lot of Jay-Z's early work because it didn't have any deeper meaning in it for me. Because it made him wealthy, right, and powerful. And so, better, my perspective, meh. Maybe not. Does the universe care? Meh, speck of dust, right? But I think to me, if we can think deeper and if we can think differently, it allows us to, we become better as people. And so I would say there is a value judgment there. Like, I could still have my Jay-Z hustling way of life, right? And be able to see and understand a different perspective, and a different way of seeing it. There are simpler ways of seeing things. And in fact, that gives me a chance to riff into politics, if I can. So we have this conversation going on in both our house and then in the folks that I talk to about politics about, is 45 smart? This is a constant conversation. Is he smart? And I say, yeah, he's smart. I mean, I think, come on, it's pretty clear when you're able to set goals and achieve those goals, that takes a level of smarts, intelligence. Mm-hmm. But he's also simple. And that is the danger. And so when we talk philosophy, you're looking for complexity. You're looking to, complexity is beautiful in philosophy. That's what you're actually looking to find, to build that complex, beautiful picture that more clearly reflects I use this word loosely, but reality that we face. We're talking about, go all the way in on it. We're talking about philosophy, but yeah. Yes, sir. But the issue I have with 45 is he's smart but simple. And so simple people miss things. And details outside of the simple box don't matter. This is the box of power. This is the box that matters to me. Nothing else outside of that matters. And simple leaders are the types of people that create or that cultivate the circumstances that lead to revolution. Yeah. Because they miss, because if it's not in that box, it doesn't exist. And it does exist, right? And it is growing. Meanwhile, the leader doesn't care.
Yeah, it doesn't rate for them. Mm-hmm. Right? It's I think that you touched on something there with it's actually something I personally rail against, is in sort of the construction we put around smart, as if we say someone is smart, then we deem that all of their behavior will will follow that sort of like train of thought, like will end up in correct behavior. Like that. So once you're smart, then you'll do the right thing. And it's like, no, you won't. Those are right thing is a whole separate kind of that, you know, that deals with the nature of the relationships and the situations and other factors that have nothing to do necessarily with your, you know, specific capacity, you know, in terms of, you know, depending on how you feel about the whole idea of intelligence. You could be, I mean, to give an example, I'm currently listening to his book, Legacy of Ashes, which is the history of the CIA. And the first, you know, so far, I mean, one of the repeating concepts is you got all these Harvard, Yale dudes that feel like they are really smart, making. And not only do we know in theory that these were bad decisions, like making terrible decisions as it pertains to the way people's lives that were lost, resources that were destroyed, and the perpetuation of concepts that I would say we're still dealing with the ramifications of, right? Those dudes were smart. It didn't necessarily mean they had the moral compass to realize you probably shouldn't kill Patrice Lumumba, seeing as the people chose him. Maybe you should respect that they have the agency to make their own decisions, and if you know, dealt with them with some respect, maybe they would be cool with you. Right? No, we got to kill him because he's not picking a side and he's got to be out. Like, this is, you know, like that. It's such and the other manifestation I see it with kids and young people is sometimes we start assigning certain kids as smart and other kids as not necessarily not smart, but not smart. You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't call them smart.
We don't,
So
there are some we call not smart too.
There's some we call not. And so those kids that aren't being called smart go, yeah, my decisions are like, you know, they start also adopting an idea that somehow my behavior or my choices, like I may not have the capacity to make other choices than the ones I'm making right now. And I think that is a profoundly dangerous thing that we allow to stay alive.
Yeah, I agree. I think it, again, we're in that philosophical space. There's that one of my core values or core beliefs is that we live in a universe of abundance, right? This is, I mean, you could ask the really, really smart people when it comes to resources that we have in this universe. Like, is there enough? The really, really smart people are going to be like, there's way more than we could even get to. We don't even know how to get to all the resources that are in this universe. And that's, you know, that's physical resources, but it's also all of the stuff that could improve our lives that's not physical. Right. And so that allows us into the emotional space as well. We don't know how to get at that. We don't know how to tap into the multitudes of vast energy that we have in this. I mean, they talk about how much sun hits the earth in a minute and what the amount of power that is, you know, we don't know how to maximize on that. And yet we have entire systems that are built up on scarcity. I mean, the first thing I learned in economics is that the universe is scarce, that there's not enough. And so we got to have a system to be able to carve out and hand out the amount of resources to people. And that's not even, so I say the universe, but it's not even true on the earth. There's enough resources on this earth for every man, woman, and child to have all the food, shelter, clothing, everything they need taken care of, and for people to still be billionaires. There's actually literally enough for that. And so, you know, for me, a lot of my attitude, the way that I flow, the way I move in life is based on that. And I try to be really careful not to say that to folks who are struggling. It's, you know, when I was broke and saying it, people were like, yeah, you know, but I'm not broke. You know, I have a good job. My family lives well. I own my home. And so for me to say it now, it means something very different. So whenever I say it now, I try to say I am mindful that everybody doesn't have what they need. I'm mindful that there are resources that should be getting to people that don't get to people. But what I want for folks to recognize is it's not because the resources don't exist. And particularly when I'm talking to folks who don't have, I want folks to recognize you don't have. It's not because of the person who lives next door to you or in the neighborhood over there that has a house.
Right.
It's because of the person who will never come around you who has 1 million houses.
Right.
Right.
Due to a much bigger, web of, I guess if they resource allocations, so to speak. And
that's it.
I think, cause I didn't want to lose the piece on 45. I think that is a thing that we will do is assuming that someone who operates like he does, it's just because he missed this vital piece of information that would change. It's like, no, this is who he sees himself as.
Absolutely.
This is how he gets down. This is how he marshals whatever, all his neurons and synapses and whatnot. This is how he directs them.
Yeah.
To take, and this has been a quote that's been rolling with, I know it's pulled into my own context in terms of something Jay-Z said in the end of his song. You was who you was when you got here. You know what I mean? Like, I know who you are. I've seen your type of person before. Like, and for the people that, I don't know if it's, the dissonance, if it's the trying to figure it out, you know what I mean? But sort of that, like, for me, if I'm in on one of these arguments, I'm going to let you know I'm on team. Nah, he's doing exactly what he thinks makes sense and using, and the stuff that he ignores or the stuff he doesn't think matters.
Right.
And that, or at least, and at minimum, definitely doesn't matter to him.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and once but I think sometimes I don't know. I'm not even going to say it. I'm going to hold that thought. Yeah, I'm going to hold that thought.
Okay. Yeah. I do think underlying the mentality of many simple, smart people is this belief that there's scarcity. It's a core belief and a core value that flow through some people and some cultures even more so than others. And so that's why I bring it up and mention it. Is I think we can all take a second and reflect on the vastness of this universe that we occupy and the teeny tininess of the space that we actually occupy in this universe, right? And go, there's a way.
Yeah.
Right. There's a way. There's enough. There's no reason. I just watching my feed today, and some folks running up in a school. I believe it was in Mali, but I could be incorrect. No, it's Niger. In Niger, and you see the level of violence in the world. I mean, and we're actually very insulated from the amount of violence that's in the world. We think 150, we think 300 shootings in a major city, even 1,000 shootings in a major city, is a war zone. And, then you'll watch Vice News and see Syria and you see a war zone, right?
A war zone.
Yeah. An actual live, government is murdering their own people war zone, and it's not to minimize what's happening in Chicago, or what's happening in other major cities. It is just to shed light on, as a global community, we're all connected, and the violence that's happening in other countries is connected to the violence that's happening in this country. And if we can follow that thread, right? If we can actually connect those two and follow that thread and understand that, if Black girls in South Central or Compton are unsafe, there's a direct correlation between that and Black girls in Nigeria being taken from their schools and no government's giving a damn. Mm-hmm. Had that been ISIS taking over an oil field, everybody would have cared. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
And I think that there's too with that and some and I think it's something that filters down to the day-to-day experience, right? And that something traumatic like that happening, right? The girls, young women in Nigeria, and I remember during that time, people were like, people need to do something, and then because I like to say to people, then so you're cool if we land some U.S. troops. And so I'm talking to people who are on the revolution, and they're like, well, Well, I'm saying, like,
Yeah.
and then on the filter down to like the local intermediate level, you know, when something happens in the community here, or like, oh, this girl was kidnapped, or and it's like me as an individual, what would stop me from, you know, we got to get a posse together and go find this young woman, right? And it's like, well, I got kids and I got, like, you know, you start running the math on what are my other responsibilities. You know, if you decided to operate extra legally and just go do your own mission to recover, you know, to bring this person back, all the rest of us gonna make sure your kids can live and eat and go to college and everything else because you're gonna go to jail. They're gonna put you in jail. They're gonna be like, "Thank you for saving the girl.
Yeah,
you weren't really authorized to be up in there shooting. You know, like you weren't allowed to go jump in your car and make your own
come with us, Rambo.
Yeah, come with us, sir.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and I don't say that in any way to discourage folks from acting, right? If they feel they need to act, especially if something's local intermediate, but to bear witness to the obstacle that are between, and even in, you know, I'm sure the Nigerian government appreciated everyone's concern, but I'm sure they also went like, no, you are not landing anybody in here to do anything in our country.
Right.
You know, the same way, you know, Britain was like, you know what we need to do? We need to go ahead and put that fire out, you know, in Eastern County. You know what I'm saying? And we're like, whoa, great, what you mean you going to land fire brigade and trucks and boats? No, this is America. We got this. You know what I'm saying? Like, even if we don't got it, it's like, you know, because some of that is due to where we're at in terms of the concept of community and village, that there's a trust issue there. I think something that you might have brought up earlier, that if I let you in to put the fire out, then you might want to stay around and feel like I have an obligation to let you stay around because you helped put the fire out.
Yeah, I'm gonna take these 1,000 tons or 100,000 tons of wood with us back too, of the lumber back as payment.
Huh? What? You do? So it's, you know, it gets, you know, that complexity that we try to avoid, though. We'll try to, you know, even, and so I honor the idea of, like, we do need to speak to the wrong, but then also I think it's healthy to start to do the thought exercise on what would we want? You know what I mean? I think that is an important part of moving kind of how you see yourself along, to go like, what is my limit? Like, where I go decide that it's worth the risk, you know, if I got to make some kind of move of some sort.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I hear that. I feel we have to ensure that our actual human connection is demonstrated through the systems that govern us. Yeah. You know, one of the things that I like a lot, that I think we don't really, this country doesn't value, is the International Declaration of Human Rights. You know, this country hasn't affirmed the International Declaration of Human Rights as a governing document. And it's just, it's interesting, right? Because we're supposed to be, or I shouldn't say supposed to be, we were at one time thought of as the moral compass of the world. And at one time, throughout times in history, we thought of ourselves as one of the leading democracies in the world. Well, it's just really interesting. You know, you think of valuing the people, which are ultimately the ultimate power in the democracy, hopefully, valuing the people. But we won't declare the people's human rights. We won't declare that the people have certain rights against being treated certain ways. Yeah. And of course, if we don't declare it, then we're not declaring it for other people. We're saying
that's part of why we don't declare it,
because then we can go run ramshot around the world. Right?
I mean, what did their law say? I'm saying, you know, we really want that vanilla plant, like, you know what I'm saying? We really want that cocoa beans.
Yeah, exactly. You know, one of them bananas. Yeah, you know what I'm
saying? Right? But I got so much oil there, though.
Right.
You know exactly. Like a lot of oil.
You know what we could do with that? You know,
I mean, they ain't even using it right.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, they don't even know nothing about that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right. So again, you know, recognizing again, there's abundance, and probably the most abundant thing we have is actually I should flip that. I should say there is abundance, but we are scarce. And what I do, and this is the other thing. So that started as a statement for me. I was trying to write down my values, my core values, and I just started. I was like, well, let me start with scarcity because I see a lot of scarcity mentality, and I want to speak to that. I want my value to be something different. There's abundance, right? And then I started pushing that, kicking that can down the road a little further and thinking more about it. And I was like, actually, there are some things that aren't abundant. What's not abundant? And, so the reality is there is collective abundance, but as individuals, we are scarce. In other words, how much time do you have? Right? That is the marker of human scarcity. That is it. The amount of time you have as a living sentient being, that's where scarcity is. Mm-hmm. I believe that's why we have scarcity reflected through capitalism. It's just time being reflected through our system. But if you pull the thread back, now we have corporations that are timeless. Right. They can live forever,
extend across, reinterpret themselves in a new way from what they were 100 years ago or 50 years ago.
Yeah. And that may be the coldest part of all of it, right? Because 150 years ago, we could have been about enslaving folks and raping women and all that, and that could have been amazingly beneficial to us. That actually could be why we exist. That could have been our core philosophy. Right. And then, wars happen, things change, we revamp, we lose a lot of capital, we revamp, but we're built on a solid foundation, and then we come back and we say, actually, now freedom is our core value.
Yeah, we're all about expressing human potential.
Meanwhile, we paid nothing.
Right.
We've done nothing to undo the harm. And so that's damaging at the end of the day to our systems. Are damaging to capital democracy. That's damaging at the end of the day. Not just the feelings that breeds, but you got to pay what you owe. At the end of the day, you got to pay what you owe.
That's to reconcile.
Yeah.
At some point.
Yep. So,
well, damn, CJ, you're on fire, man. So we're getting close to the wall. So let me pivot into where I'd like to exit. And usually I go either movies or music.
Okay.
What would you like to close out our conversation?
Well,
or somewhere in the middle.
Let's go with the middle, because movies. I think a lot of the movies I watch. When I tell people who are movie heads who love movies as literature and stuff, all that about the movies I watch, they're like, "Oh, you watch that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, they're the highest grossing movies." But I'll just say I love the MCU. I love Marvel. I love DC, because they're myth. They're myths. They're modern myths, and the whole idea of a superhero, they're constantly grappling with the collective versus the individual. They're grappling with all of these deep inner philosophical issues. So to say that, I'm looking forward to Thor Ragnarok coming out.
Yeah, me too.
That's my joint.
All right, let me hit you with the question, and then we can wrap. So,
okay.
And I guess it's two parts. So first part would be, can you just give a movie that, and if you're old enough to remember the days when you would turn on TV and something would be on that you didn't pick.
Yep.
Right. So you turn on the television, this movie's on that you didn't pick, but it's on, and now you start to reconsider what you're going to do with the rest of the next 2 hours because you want to watch it. Right. So what would be a movie that falls in that category?
Ooh, okay.
And then, all right, and then the music question would be, is there, in a music way, is there an album or an artist who, if you were planning to listen to one thing and you happen to accidentally put on, artist A, you go, "Oh man, I ain't listening to that. I'm listening to this now." All right. Does that make sense? So similar.
Yeah, I see. Right, so okay. So I'll start with the music one because I had that experience this summer. My nephews were around. My oldest nephew is 17, and youngest nephew is 14. So the older one keeps me tight. He tightens me up. He makes sure that I can hear what's new and what's fresh, whether or not I agree with what's being said. He's my window into young hip hop. So he put on Joey Badass, and he had been telling me to listen to him for quite a while, and I've kind of always been anti cats that. There's a few things about his name that just rub me the wrong way. Like, if you're such a badass, why you gotta say it? What's your real name? Your mama didn't name you Joey. Why do you spell your name with dollar signs? All of that type of stuff, right? Just generational stuff. I'm sure if me and Joey Badass were to sit down, or whatever his government name is, were to sit down and have a conversation, I'm sure I would probably have a great conversation with him. So my nephew puts on a couple of his songs, and I was like, oh, this dude's tight. Well, he's speaking the kind of hip hop that I like to hear, something that makes me think, but also keeps it real. Doesn't has some level of realness. Life is not. We're not talking fake world where everybody sings Kumbaya and hugs trees and stuff. So, so that would be the one. Okay. And then having a tougher one on movies because the world is so. For me, I don't even have cable anymore. So the world is so. I don't put it on unless I want to see it. At this point, I'll bring up one just for fun. There was one Jackie Chan movie that was on Netflix that we started watching last week. We had to turn it off because it was ridiculous. But I ended up putting it back on and watching it the next day when I just didn't want to think about anything. Yeah. It was like Kung Fu versus Yoga, I think is what it was called, or something like that.
What you're talking about.
Yeah.
I haven't seen it. It's some silly ones out
It's silly, and it's like horribly done. It's fluffy. It's Jackie Chan is the main character, and then there's an Indian woman, and that's the premise of it. They're both professors, or they're both, she's acting like a professor when she first comes, but the woman they pick is extremely fair skinned, like she looks white, basically. And then as the movie picks up, though, they have some other women join that are clearly Indian women. But they're also very, very light skinned as well. They don't have any dark Indian people until the end when the spiritual people come around with the head wraps and stuff. So. There's some stuff going on like that. And it's just very fluffy Jackie Chan-ish. But I turned it back on and watched it. I finished it. It was basically Jackie Chan's version of Indiana Jones. With a little bit of yoga versus, constantly talking about yoga versus Kung Fu. So I dropped that one. There has to be a better one. There has to be one that I've watched, but it just hasn't been recent enough for me to remember now.
Time is what it is. It's all good. I think I enjoy a good, much to the chagrin sometimes of the person who loves me. I will watch a really unredeemable, silly movie. But only one I'm curious. Sometimes, I want to like giggle and I want to go like, man, this is ridiculous. Somebody's, look at the credits and think, man, look at all the people that got paid to make this tomfoolery. Yep. It's abundant, as you said. There's an abundance of wealth out here. This is terrible. Yeah. But also to give, I just need, a couple hours of, respite from all the weight of everything else. And so, word up, man. Well, CJ, thank you for sharing with me today. Thank you for adding on. Anything you want to plug or say just on the way out? And you got a closing message for the people? Man,
nothing in particular. I will say, you and I have been steeped in work together with my day job, Black Male Achievement, and I'm appreciative of that. So I'll give a plug to Black Male Achievement Portland, and really I won't keep it contained to that. Really to all efforts that are looking to improve the situation that you see around you in a way that taps into the abundance. So I'll give that plug. I will give a shout out to my hometown, Tacoma, as well, Tacoma, Washington, and a little bit for Seattle too, because they were close, and it's one of my favorite cities. So. All right.
Well, please, thank you for being with me, and I'll let you know when it's going to be on the air and all that. So
cool. I can dig it, brother. Appreciate you.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for doing what you're doing. This is cool. This opens a brand new space for me mentally, so I can dig it.
All right. Appreciate it. All right. Peace.